In the summer of 1991, John Singleton exploded onto the Hollywood scene with Boyz N the Hood, a raw, unsparing portrait of life in South Central Los Angeles. In the words of director Thomas Schlam, Singleton didn't just make his feature film debut in 1991, he exploded into Hollywood, our culture, and our consciousness with such a powerful cinematic depiction of life in the inner city. The film's arrival was seismic, a coming-of-age story that broke Hollywood's silence on urban Black America and resonated far beyond its LA setting. As Roger Ebert observed, Boyz N the Hood is a thoughtful, realistic look at a young man's coming of age, and also a human drama of rare power. He hailed it not only as an important work, but as an American film of enormous importance. The authenticity of its characters and situations, from gunfire on street corners to helicopters circling overhead, gave audiences a sense that they were witnessing something vital, unflinching, and profoundly necessary. The film is set in a South Central neighborhood known simply as the Hood, a place both familiar and foreign to wider American audiences. Singleton, only 24 when he wrote and directed the movie, drew directly on his upbringing. Tre experiences moving from a middle-class upbringing into Crenshaw, mirroring Singleton's own transition when he went to live with his father at age 12. The community he portrays is rife with economic hardship and systemic neglect. At the same time, it has a powerful sense of family and history. Singleton explores how these forces collide in the lives of young Black men trying to find their way. Ebert notes that as Tre grows into his teens, he and his friends go their own way, but there is always the possibility that words will lead to insults, that insults will lead to a need to prove their manhood, that with guns everywhere, somebody will be shot dead. Those stark choices, education or violence, life or death, are at the film's core, giving it both a heartbreaking immediacy and a timeless resonance. The story is told primarily through the eyes of Tre Styles, an intelligent and earnest teenager. Sent by his mother Riva to live with his father Furious Styles, Tre enters a world very different from the one he left. Furious is a mortgage broker and Vietnam veteran, educated, disciplined, and hardworking, who exerts a tight grip on Tre's values and conduct. This fatherhood figure becomes a moral compass for Tre. Furious repeatedly reminds Tre of his hopes and responsibilities, imparting lessons like, "I'm trying to teach you to be responsible," and "Any fool with a dick can make a baby, but only a real man can raise his children." These lines among the film's most famous underscore a core theme, what it means to be a man and a father in a world that often seems set against them. Critics have noted that Furious channeled his masculinity in a positive direction, standing apart as virile yet conscientious. In a neighborhood filled with machismo and despair, Furious is portrayed as perhaps Hollywood's greatest dad, a role model who challenges not only Tre, but the audience to rethink assumptions about Black fatherhood. From the opening scenes, Furious takes Tre under his wing as both a father and mentor. Singleton presents Furious not as a distant patriarch, but as a tough love coach. He teaches Tre practical skills, mowing the lawn, using tools, and also drills into him the discipline of education and self-respect. As one commentator observes, Furious embodied the pivotal role of a father in his child's life, making clear that without his guidance, Tre would likely follow a darker path. When Riva delivers Tre to Furious's front yard, Furious thanks her for the opportunity. He is not reluctant to assume his parental role, but grateful for it. Even in small moments like giving Tre a stack of chores to do, Furious is deliberate. He warns Tre, "I'm trying to teach you to be responsible," imbuing daily tasks with life lessons. Commentators note that Furious, a single father, models a disciplined, invested form of Black masculinity. He stands in contrast to other fathers in the film, notably the absentee father of Doughboy, demonstrating how intentional parenting can steer a boy towards stability. In fact, as Boyz N the Hood unfolds, it becomes painfully clear how much Tre owes his chances to Furious. Tre's old friends Ricky and Doughboy, both motherless in different ways, face grim fates, whereas Tre's future remains open, nurtured by the cool teacher in his house. Furious himself admits that Tre was fortunate. When Riva handed her son over, it was his best chance of not ending up dead or in jail or drunk. That assessment, though blunt, highlights how crucial Furious's mentorship is to the film's message about family and survival. From the very first day Tre moves in with him, Furious makes one thing crystal clear: this household, this life, they're going to be different. Not because Tre is better than his friends, but because Furious refuses to let the world decide who his son will become. He draws a line in the sand, not just between right and wrong, but between survival and surrender. Furious doesn't just speak in lectures, he speaks in lessons, life mottos, etched from years of experience, pain, and hard-earned wisdom. He doesn't just want Tre to listen, he wants him to understand. So he makes Tre repeat the words back to him in his own voice, in his own language. Not as a test, but as a ritual, a way of rooting those values deep in his spirit, so they'll be there when the world tries to strip them away. These aren't just rules, they're tools, a moral compass in a world designed to keep young black men lost, a shield against the systematic traps that hide in plain sight. Poor schools, over-policing, violence masked as manhood, and a society that expects them to fail. Furious teaches Tre that manhood isn't about dominance or bravado, but about discipline, integrity, and vision. He knows that Tre will be judged harshly, treated unfairly, and offered fewer chances. So he gives his son the gift of clarity, of knowing who he is before the world tells him who he's not. And in doing so, Furious isn't just raising a boy, he's breaking a cycle. Quietly, powerfully, he's teaching Tre that survival isn't enough, that a black man can live with purpose, pride, and peace, even in a world that tells him he shouldn't. Fatherhood in Boyz N the Hood is not idealized fantasy, it is a lived reality with hard edges. Furious is often stern, telling Tre, "Don't ever do this," or giving pragmatic lectures about sex and responsibility. When he describes using a condom even if a girl is on birth control, it is blunt but earnest advice. He demands honesty and effort from Tre. Early on, after Tre fights at school, Furious simply loads him with yard work and offers only one answer when Tre asks what his father is. "I'm a father, that's it." Furious's approach is neither sentimental nor preachy. He is surgical, strategic. In the words of one modern analysis, he treats life lessons like strategies for survival, a mentor more than an authoritarian figure. Indeed, one viewer likens Furious to the Hood's first investment coach, teaching Tre how to move and think strategically so he can beat the system. In this way, Furious's fatherhood transcends the personal. He is grooming Tre not just to be his son, but to challenge the societal obstacles arrayed against him. Yet Furious cannot guard Tre from every peril. The film shows that despite good parenting, systemic forces and neighborhood violence still press in on these young men. From the very beginning, crime and racism form a backdrop. As Abert notes, the neighborhood's police helicopters make it feel like the guard lights in a prison camp with guns on street corners, and the ever-present danger that a kid can go down to the corner store and not come home alive. Singleton even highlights a black police officer who embodies the crushing weight of institutional racism. Ebert observes that Singleton paints the cops as an occupying force, singling out one self-hating black cop who uses his authority to mishandle young black men. This critique of policing and racism is woven seamlessly into Tre's family narrative. For all Furious's emphasis on individual responsibility and real man values, the film reminds us that Tre and his friends are not simply in control of their own destinies. They are shaped by a world of systemic neglect, a theme that contemporary scholars and commentators emphasize. One analysis argues that the film's true antagonist is systemic racism itself, the invisible force orchestrating poverty, violence, and broken institutions in Crenshaw. Economically, Tre's world is one of scarcity and inequality. While Tre's friends Ricky and Doughboy come from families trapped in poverty, the film makes a point that Tre's mother is pursuing a master's degree. She is educated, yet even her relative stability is undercut by the environment they inhabit. Ricky, the star football player, is poised to break this cycle with a scholarship, representing hope and hard work paying off. Doughboy, by contrast, lacks that pipeline to a future. He drifts into alcohol and small crimes as a way to assert control or gain status. As Abert writes, Doughboy is not a bad person, but he is into booze and drugs and will sooner or later find bad trouble. Singleton paints Doughboy and Ricky as products of the same soul-crushing neighborhood, with divergent paths largely hinging on parental presence and opportunity. One film scholar notes that the movie highlights the socioeconomic challenges that ravage low-income black communities and shows how black boys in the hood are pushed toward a school-to-prison pipeline, or dead ends if not given proper support. The poverty is so entrenched that basic necessities are scarce, and the film does not shy away from depicting the hunger, unemployment, and desperation that the characters endure. Yet within this bleak milieu, Singleton still finds small pockets of humor, warmth, and family, illustrating that even when society fails them, black communities nurture love and dreams. Tre and Ricky walk into Furious's office, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the pavement, each step heavier than the last. They've just taken the SAT, the supposed golden ticket to a future outside their neighborhood, outside the cycle. But when Furious greets them and asks how it went, neither of them has much to say. Just a shrug, a tired glance, and Furious doesn't push. He sees it immediately, the weight behind their silence. the kind of quiet that doesn't come from not caring but from knowing deep down that the game is rigged. He nods slowly, not with disappointment, but with a heavy understanding. Those tests weren't made for you, he says, not bitterly, but truthfully. They weren't written with your story in mind. In that moment, it's not just about a test, it's about a system that measures intelligence without context. A system that asks you to fill in bubbles when your life has been spent dodging bullets. A system that praises merit, but never accounts for the barriers some kids are born behind. Furious isn't saying the test doesn't matter, but he's reminding them that failure on it wouldn't be a reflection of their worth, because when the rules are written by those who've never walked in your shoes, playing fair still leaves you behind. There's sorrow in his voice, but not defeat. Just the ache of a father who knows the odds and still dares to teach his son how to rise above them. Because real intelligence, real value can't be captured in a score. It lives in resilience and integrity, in knowing the truth and still choosing to move forward. In a rare moment of conversation that strays from bravado, Doughboy begins to speak, almost admirably, about women saying, if God was a bitch, there wouldn't be no nuclear bombs, no wars, no shit like that. Because that ain't in a bitch's nature. At first glance, it's jarring, Doughboy calling God a bitch. But listen closer, and what he's really doing is trying to reconcile the chaos around him with the idea of a higher power. In his world, death comes without warning, justice feels like a myth, and peace is a rumor passed down by people who don't live where he does. So he speaks in the language he knows, blunt, unpolished, and deeply honest. When Doughboy says if God was a bitch, he's not insulting God. He's reshaping the divine through his own experience, imagining a God rooted in the softness and emotional intelligence traditionally associated with women, a God that nurtures, protects, and values life over power. What he's really asking is, why does the world have to be this way? Why is violence so constant? Why is destruction so easy and healing so rare? And then he offers a kind of answer. Because that ain't in a bitch's nature. He's pointing to the masculine coded forces that dominate the world: ego, war, control, and violence. In contrast, he imagines that a feminine divine force would bring something more tender, more intuitive, more compassionate. A world without bombs, without wars, without kids gunned down in the street for wearing the wrong colors. It's a moment of profound vulnerability disguised in bravado. Doughboy's trying to make sense of a broken world. He's not a theologian, he's a young man who's seen too much and been given too few tools to process it. This quote is his way of mourning, of philosophizing, of reaching for something beyond the violence that defines his daily reality. It's a reflection of something bigger, a yearning for softness in a world that only rewards hardness, a longing for care in a place that offers cruelty. For Doughboy, imagining a different kind of God, a different kind of power, isn't just rebellion, it's survival, it's hope, quietly dressed as cynicism, because deep down what he's really saying is, maybe this world doesn't have to be like this, maybe it could be gentler, maybe we could be too. For a fleeting second, it seems like he's peeling back the layers, acknowledging something real, but then he ends the thought the way he always does, with the word bitches. One of the women in his circle doesn't let it slide. She calls him out, tired of the casual disrespect, of being reduced to a slur no matter the context. Her voice isn't just angry, it's wounded, because it's not just Doughboy, it's everywhere, in the streets, in the music, in the silence. Throughout the film, women, especially black women, are almost exclusively referred to in derogatory terms. Rarely seen as whole people, rarely spoken to with dignity, it's a pattern that reveals something deeper, the internalized pain of a community conditioned to see itself through the lens of survival, where vulnerability is weakness, and manhood is mistaken for dominance. The film doesn't glorify this, it exposes it. In the background of all the violence, poverty, and systemic oppression, there's another fight being waged, one within the community itself, a fight for respect, a fight for recognition. The scene becomes more than just a moment of tension, it's a mirror held up to the black male psyche, showing how even in spaces meant to be safe, black women are often left unprotected, unseen, and unloved. It's a quiet indictment of a culture shaped by oppression but still responsible for the harm it perpetuates within.
Some of the Crips and the Bloods, two of LA County's most vicious gangs.
LA police are getting their orders as they prepare for another assault on street gangs.
But that was before the Los Angeles Police Department declared war on street gangs in the city, and before a shooting Wednesday night,
low. Just dust low.
All right, hold on. Let me just ask you a question.
Why are you guys Bloods? Why are you in the gangs? Why is we in the gang? I guess because the area we grew up in, man.
Everybody go in that area, man. Everybody follow the same line. BGs grow up to be OGs, little niggas.
His gang name is Dusty Loke.
What's up, bro? What's up, beat that?
Short for Dusty Loco, Crazy Dusty. He is a blood wearing the blood color, red. Dusty is a gang banger, which is what they call you when you've been allowed in as a full-time active gang member.
You're proud of the fact that you're in the
From
gang.
Lime Hood, yeah.
From Lime Hood, but you're proud of the fact that you're blood.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I'm down. I'm down for it. Because I'm a true. I come from the heart.
But why? Why be in a gang? What's in it for you?
What's in it?
I mean, you get killed, right?
Yeah.
Well, you mean some of your friends been killed?
Yeah.
So
For the simple cause.
what's the simple cause?
Of being a blood. Going down with the bloods. That's how we feel. We die, it's like we go kill one of them. One of them die, because they down for it. They'll get took out.
And then guess what happens after one of them die?
And they come back. And then it's a
Right.
feud until they don't want no more, until everybody just drop it. But ain't nobody gonna drop it.
Now, you're willing to die for whatever this cause is?
If that's what it takes.
Yeah, I'm not saying you want to. I'm saying you
No,
would.
I don't want to. But if somebody riled up on me and take me out, I guess it was my time to go like that. But ain't nobody did it yet, so I guess it ain't my time to go.
How old are you?
I'm 17.
Say cuz, and other than that, it ain't no difference at all.
See, I'm telling you now, don't be with crazy. I tell you, but my homeboy's name was Avery. He was standing on the corner. The crowds rolled by, the crowds rolled out, but I don't know why. You see, he stood there because he thought it was a climb. They rolled out his name and they said, let's try. They pulled out the gat and they pulled the trigger, but Avery looked back and his eyes got bigger.
Amid these pressures, gang culture looms large in Boyz N the Hood. Laid-back street routines, drive-by shootings, and the specter of gang wars provide the film's most visceral moments. We see the film's young men, Ricky and Doughboy, as participants in a neighborhood where the residents fight to survive in an empty, violent world. This is not glamorized or sensationalized. Singleton shows the boredom and boredom lash out of a community with nothing better to do, as the lyric says. At one point, Ricky rejects the neighborhood catcalls of girls and even tries to break the chain when Doughboy hesitates at a liquor store, a small act of defiance against the destructive forces around him. Doughboy's very name is a testament to gang influence. Born an unmarried child, his mother calls him Doughboy, a street nickname implying a life raised by money, or lack thereof, rather than family. Still, even within gang culture, the film finds nuance. In their tender final scene, Doughboy quietly takes Tre aside on a street corner. He knows in his bones what horrors await him as he foreshadows, "You're gonna see how they end up too," and he desperately urges Tre to use the opportunities Furious provides. Here the script is at its most poignant. Doughboy, caught in the trappings of gang life, nonetheless refuses to let Tre share his fate. Ebert points to this moment as evidence that Singleton's screenplay is carefully built. Doughboy walks across the street and speaks quietly to Tre. He knows what is likely to happen, and yet wants his friend to escape the trap, to realize his future. The scene is tragic and hopeful all at once, the older brother figure in Doughboy's eyes urging the younger to be stronger. Doughboy gets approached by a mother lost to addiction, who once again is out on the block, loud, desperate, harassing anyone within reach for money or a fix. His words are sharp, aggressive, laced with frustration. To an outsider it might look like cruelty, but here, in this neighborhood shaped by poverty, by broken systems and broken promises, this is what truth sounds like. He's not just yelling at her, he's yelling at everything that led her here, at the drugs that hollowed out whole families, at the neglect that made self-destruction seem like the only option, at the world that looks away. But beneath the rage, there's something else, something deeper, a kind of care that can only exist in places where survival depends on community. Doughboy isn't cruel because he doesn't care. He's harsh because he does. His eyes keep drifting toward her small child, yelling, "Keep them goddamn babies out the street." A baby too young to understand the chaos, too innocent to know the weight of the world they were born into. In this moment, the film captures a complex truth, that even in the hardest corners of the world, where tempers flare and wounds run deep, humanity still flickers, community still fights to protect what it can, and men like Doughboy, flawed, hardened, but not heartless, carry that burden every single day. An academic perspective further illuminates the dynamics of these male characters. Some scholars have framed Boyz N the Hood as depicting two styles of black masculinity. In this reading, Doughboy and his peers embody a vulgar masculinity defined by cynicism, alcohol, drugs, and reactive violence that the film portrays as self-destructive. In contrast, Furious, Tre, and Ricky represent a conscious, disciplined bourgeois masculinity, emphasizing responsibility, education, and family leadership. The film, according to this analysis, seems to advocate the latter as the path out of poverty. For instance, Furious explicitly defines manhood as protection and guidance. He tells Tre, "You my son, and I'm not gonna lose you to no bullshit. You hear? I love you, man." By framing these two models side by side, the film asks the audience to consider how black men are socialized. However, this same scholars also warns that the film's solution of respectable masculinity can risk sidelining other voices. By elevating Furious's model, the film might inadvertently reinforce patriarchal norms and ignore feminist critiques of male dominance. In other words, Boyz N the Hood carefully portrays masculine role models, but also leaves room for questions about gender and community. Importantly, it does not depict Furious as flawless and quarreling with Tre's mother. Still, he remains the most compelling father figure on screen, one whose actions, like grabbing a gun to protect Tre during a burglary, send a message about defending his family and neighborhood against outside threats. Masculinity also intersects with race and systemic oppression. Can't afford to be afraid of our own people anymore, man. This line speaks volumes about solidarity and internalized fear within the community. While driving through the neighborhood, Furious pulls the car over and gestures toward a billboard that reads, "We buy houses, fast cash." It's the kind of sign most people pass without a second thought, but not Furious. He asks Tre and Ricky what they see. They shrug, unsure. Then with a firm yet weary voice, he begins to explain. "That's not just a sign," he says, "that's a warning." He breaks down the quiet violence of gentrification, how it starts with offers like this, targeting struggling families with promises of quick cash, families who've lived here for generations, pushed out one by one until the whole neighborhood is hollowed out, rebuilt, and sold back at a price they can no longer afford. They don't just want the land, Furious tells him, they want the culture gone, the people gone, us gone. He goes deeper, speaking of how white influence creeps into black lives through media, policy, and the economy. He talks about the subtle, calculated ways the system divides black people, encouraging envy, distrust, and infighting. They pit us against each other so we'll never see who the real enemy is, he says. So we'll tear each other down before we ever get the chance to build something real. His voice trembles, not with fear, but with conviction. That's why we have to stick together. That's why we have to own what's ours, protect what's ours, love what's ours, because if we don't, no one else will. It's not just a lesson in economics, it's a plea for unity, for awareness, for survival. Yet, even with these layers of social commentary, Boyz N the Hood remains first a story of people. Its cultural impact has only grown. Scholars and writers note that the film holds a special place in Black American cinema. It was one of the first mainstream Hollywood films to portray inner-city black life from an insider's perspective, influencing generations of filmmakers. As one retrospective points out, Boyz N the Hood was the first black movie perspective of the dangerous atmosphere where American black youngsters are raised. Its influence rippled into the 21st century. Producer Steve Nicolaides, who worked closely with Singleton, argues that one of the film's enduring legacies is its role in shaping national conversations about race. At a university talk, he even credited Boyz N the Hood with starting the conversation about race that still continues into the Black Lives Matter era. In this sense, the film did not just mirror reality, it demanded attention to it. Singleton himself hoped audiences would take its lessons to heart. After all, he saw Boyz N the Hood as a parable based on his life. In interviews, he revealed that Furious Styles was largely modeled on his own father, a hardworking single dad who turned Singleton's life around. By telling his story, Singleton created a mirror for many in the black community. People saw their own fathers, brothers, and neighbors in Tre, Furious, Ricky, and Doughboy. As Variety magazine notes, at its heart, Boyz N the Hood is a harrowing tale of childhood, friendship, and peril in South LA that nevertheless concludes with a note of persistence. Reva confronts Furious, not with rage, but with a fierce, steady honesty sharpened by years of doing her own quiet labor. She tells him that while he may take pride in raising Tre, he should not wear it like a crown. Yes, he's been present. Yes, he's done right by their son in ways many men don't, and for that she gives him his due. She doesn't deny that he's been a good father, strong, guiding, dependable, but that doesn't make him a hero above reproach. It doesn't make her invisible. You don't get to act like you're better than me for being there, she tells him. You don't get a medal for doing what you were supposed to do. Her words land hard because they're not just about co-parenting, they're about the imbalance of recognition, about how society will praise a man for stepping up while a woman is expected to carry everything quietly without thanks. Riva has done the emotional lifting too, the sleepless nights, the hard decisions, the sacrifices that no one applauds. She reminds him that raising a child is not a competition, not a platform for pride. It's a shared labor of love and responsibility. And while his role has been vital, it does not give him the right to feel superior to her or to anyone else. In this moment, the film gives voice to the often silenced perspective of Black mothers, women who are expected to hold it all together even while being overshadowed by the myth of the exceptional man. Riva's words reclaim space, reminding us that strength comes in many forms, and not all of them are recognized. Ricky's aspirations died on the sidewalk, but Furious's teachings live on in Tre's cautious, determined gaze. In his final counsel, Furious gives Tre a simple choice. Either way, it's your decision. You gonna make something of yourself, or you gonna just settle for breaking your back to move buckets of weed to the playgrounds of Crenshaw? This line, delivered in the film, captures the essence of Furious's philosophy. Though unglamorous, his vision of manhood is clear. Build a future rather than succumb to the traps of the present. Such messages have resonated with audiences and artists for decades. Tre bursts through the door, heart racing, mind spinning, eyes wild with grief and rage. Ricky has just been gunned down in the street, his friend, his brother, and all but blood, and Tre's consumed by the one thing the world has always taught young Black men to turn to: retaliation. He heads straight for the drawer, pulls out the gun. His hands are shaking, but his mind is certain. He thinks this is what he has to do, that this is what being a man looks like. But before he can leave, Furious steps in calm but urgent. He doesn't yell, he doesn't scold. He sees Tre, the pain, the confusion, the desire to reclaim some kind of control in a world where so much has been stolen. Furious stops him not with force, but with truth. He challenges him to rise above the cycle, to resist the ego and pride that lead so many down a path they never return from. Don't do it, his voice says. You think this is strength? You think this makes you a man? And then something rare happens. He embraces his son fully, without hesitation. It's not just a hug, it's an act of rebellion, a moment where love breaks through the stoicism, where a father holds his son not to toughen him up, but to keep him whole. In that embrace, the film shatters the narrow mold of masculinity. It shows us that real strength is not in revenge, but in restraint, not in violence, but in vulnerability. Two Black men standing in their pain, holding each other not as warriors but as human beings. It's a moment that dares to say you don't have to be hard to survive, you just have to be human, and that too is revolutionary. Critics have continued to reflect on the film's significance. In 2018, one analysis framed Boyz N the Hood as a compelling testament to social justice principles. The author noted that Singleton highlights the socioeconomic challenges that ravage low-income Black communities, from inadequate policing to failing schools, and shows how intentional parenting, as embodied by Furious, is crucial. Another critic calls the movie still relevant, still necessary, especially as inequality and violence remain topics of concern years later. Even the phrase "into the hood" itself took on a kind of dual meaning, as both an invitation to gaze into Black urban life and a warning that the hood casts a long, difficult shadow. Through the years, Boyz N the Hood has been analyzed in film journals, cited in cultural studies, and revisited by YouTube essayists and historians alike. The consensus is that its potency endures. Roger Ebert's 1991 review can almost serve as a prescription for watching it today. In the course of one summer week or two, he wrote, all of the strands of Tre's life come together to be tested. His girlfriend, his relationship with his father, his friendships, and the dangers from the street gangs. By laying bare each strand, fatherhood, love, brotherhood, violence, and the poisonous influence of racism, the film teaches us about Tre's world and our own. Ebert reminds us that the film's power comes from knowing its characters intimately, feeling their hopes and fears, so that we can understand what happens and why. In the end, Boyz N the Hood remains a touchstone of Black cinema and American storytelling. Its legacy is tied to every young person who has walked away from the film thinking, as one commentator noted, that it is about gang violence, tragedy, and a message about staying out of trouble, and then discovering that it is deeper, a story of dreams and strategies for living amid adversity. In Tre and Furious, we see the possibility of nurturing resilience. In Ricky and Doughboy, we see the real cost when that care is absent. We hear a challenge to everyone to choose life, growth, and manhood with purpose. As Furious Styles himself bluntly reminds us, Any fool with a dick can make a baby, but only a real man can raise his children. That lyric beats at the film's poetic heart. It encapsulates the movie's most urgent lesson that caring for one another, even in the midst of the hood's hell, is what truly makes a man, and what turns a coming-of-age tale into a blueprint for hope. In the quiet stillness of the morning after Ricky's death, Doughboy sits beside Tre on the front porch. The street is almost peaceful now, as if the world has already moved on, forgotten that just hours ago blood ran down the sidewalk in broad daylight. The weight of grief hangs heavy between them, but it's Doughboy who breaks the silence. His voice is low, tired, not just from lack of sleep, but from a lifetime of carrying pain that has no place to go. He doesn't yell, he doesn't curse. He speaks plainly, honestly, like someone who's seen too much to pretend anymore. He says he was watching the news that morning, and all they talked about were wars overseas, famine in distant lands, tragedies in places the average American couldn't find on a map, but not a single word about Ricky, not a mention of the gunshots that echoed through their block, not a headline, not a moment of silence, not even a name. They act like it don't happen here, Doughboy says, like what happens to us ain't real. His words aren't just about media, they're about erasure, about the way black pain is ignored, normalized, or criminalized, about how the world can turn a blind eye to a war happening right here on American soil, a war waged quietly in poor neighborhoods, behind closed doors, in systems and institutions that never cared whether they lived or died. Doughboy isn't just confused, he's heartbroken. He's awake to a cruel truth that black lives, especially those of young black men, are often invisible to the country they were born in. The violence is so common it no longer registers. And yet, in that moment, sitting beside his friend in the aftermath of unimaginable loss, Doughboy shows us something the world rarely does, his humanity, not masked by bravado or anger, but laid bare in grief and reflection. It's a final confession, a quiet revelation. He sees what's happening and he knows it's wrong. He may not have the answers, but he understands the depth of the wound, and for once, someone is listening. In the end, it's not just a commentary on media bias, it's a eulogy for all the stories that never get told, for all the young lives lost with no headlines, no justice, and no peace.